Hi everyone, I'm Michelle. Welcome back to You Therapy. Today's video is a requested video about what are the letters behind my therapist's name. What do they mean? And first of all, I'd like to say that my opinion and the opinion of a lot of people is that those letters don't matter quite so much as your therapist's experience and the approaches or modalities that they use. Are they the kind that you're needing based on what your goals are? And they don't matter as much as the fit, the personality of your therapist, and how well you might work together. But I know that when you're searching for a therapist, that you see all those letters behind their name and wonder, is that something I should consider? What does that mean? So I'm going to describe what some of those letters mean, and you get to decide whether that's important to you or not. For in some cases it may be, in some cases it has no importance to you whatsoever. But I'll start out with saying the first letters after your therapist's name is the general degree that your therapist got after their bachelor's degree in college. So you have to complete a bachelor's degree in college, and then you go on to an advanced graduate school. If you got an MA, a Master's of Arts. If it says MS, a Master's of Science. So depending on the school, that may mean they focus more on science work, or they focus more on the humanities. PhD obviously means that they went on a few more years of school. So you'll see MS, MA, PhD sometimes behind your therapist's name, and that's just kind of the general graduate school degree that they got. After those letters, you'll see some more letters, and that is their licensure. And licensure is different state by state. They tend to have some things in common, but different states have a little bit of different requirements based on what your schooling was specifically, your internship hours were. But those letters will mean that your therapist has a license. They have completed what the state thinks is important to complete as far as, like I said, your schooling, your internship, any testing that is required by that state that is, needs to be passed, the supervision that your therapist has had as they were learning to be a therapist. So I think it is important if you are searching for something other than a life coach or a mentor, that your therapist is licensed. It means they have had to be educated, they have had to be supervised, they've had to jump through a bunch of hoops and really be dedicated and persevere to be trained to treat you in the best way that state thinks is possible. So look for that licensure when you're looking for a therapist. Now, the specific type of licensure may not matter so much. So the first one I'll talk about is the one I have. It's the LPC. That's Licensed Professional Counselor. That may also look like LCPC, a Licensed Clinical Professional Counselor, or an LMHC, Licensed Mental Health Counselor. But they all kind of mean the same things. Those just change, state by state. But in general, it means that you've been trained to treat individuals, families, and groups for behavioral and emotional problems, issues, difficulties. Well, hopefully any therapist you have been trained in that, but an LPC has had this broad general training for treating individuals and families. After those letters, you may see an S or an I. An S means that therapist is a supervisor. The I means that therapist is an intern. That may not matter to you, but we do think it's important to somehow differentiate where people's experience and training and what their role is. The next type of letters that you might see behind your therapist's name is an LSW or an LCSW. So that's a licensed clinical social worker. And if they are treating you as a therapist, they've had that general training, but it seems to be that the focus in the education is really on the way in which people perform their social roles, how the structural institutions have been created to sustain those roles. You know, the relationship between our social institutions and our functioning as a human being, as an individual. They will have probably more classes on that. Hopefully, again, your therapist, no matter what their letters, have had some training in that, but for a licensed clinical social worker or a licensed social worker, it could just be LSW, their education would have more classes and more focus on those social roles and the social functioning. Some other letters that you could see would be LMFT, Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist. And that really means that they've been trained to view change, personal change, in terms of the systems in which systems of interaction within a family unit. So the involvement of the family, the discussion of the roles and the system within a family is of higher importance for an LMFT. And just relationships of that sort is sort of the most important factor for psychological health, sometimes for an LMFT. That's what their training really revolved around, is learning those family systems and how they work and how we all take on roles within our family and how the role that we're in affects other members of the family and how it works as a unit versus we're all separate within a family. And it's kind of interesting, and I think it is important for all of us therapists to think about that, because in one way or another we're all affected by the family that we grew up in. You could be seeing a therapist who has a PhD or is a clinical psychologist. That therapist has done more education in research and testing administration, scoring, interpretation of assessments, advanced statistical analysis, research design. So while they will have the training in the applied psychology, therapy with an individual, they will also be required in their education to do that research, design, testing, scoring. That's another piece, and they will become more of an expertise in that area. And once again, I'll say that any therapy, graduate school will require that of their students, to require to study assessments and scoring and do research. But for a PhD, they've done much more of that than someone with a master's degree. That's just something that is required to be a clinical psychologist. And they will have different kinds of roles sometimes in institutions because of that additional training that they have. Does it necessarily mean they're a better therapist? No, it doesn't. None of these letters that I've gone over necessarily mean someone is a better therapist than others, but that again refers to the training that they had. So like I said, I do think the letters have matter in some ways. We need to differentiate in some ways, but it's up to you whether these differences really matter to what you are looking for. And if it does matter, be sure to ask the therapist that you're interviewing about their training and experience, if that is something that you want to know more about. But I still believe, though, that their modality, their experience, their fit with you, what they have to offer you based on what you're looking for, is the most important thing when you're looking for a therapist. If you have any questions about any of these letters, I've missed some. I've not gone into a lot of detail on each one because this would be a much longer video for that. But if you do have any questions, please leave those in the comments. And if you have found that the education and training that these letters stand for has mattered for you. I'd be interested in hearing more about that as well. So thank you for your interest in this topic, and I hope you have a great day. Be well.